Today's lesson is on angles and congruency. So as we look at different types of angles we have, we're going to be looking at how they are congruent with each other. We're going to start off with looking at some different definitions. And in your notes, what you want to take a look at is you want to actually write down the words supplementary, complementary, straight angle, and right angle. Now, if you need to pause the video so that you can write those down, please do so. So as we are looking at those, what is the definition of supplementary angles? It has to be two angles whose measure adds up to, we are looking at 180 degrees. So two angles that add to 180. Now you may have studied this before, but complementary are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. Now, do those angles have to be next to each other? No, but they could be. So you could have two angles that are like this, angle 1 and 2, where you have angle 1 and angle 2. And those two angles, if this is a right angle, sum to 100, right, sum to 90. But they don't necessarily have to be that way. You could have one angle over here being 25 degrees, and then you can have another angle over here, and if this angle together, these two are going to add to 90, we're going to have a 65-degree angle. So that when we add those together, they equal to 90. Same with supplementary. When we talk about straight angles, a straight angle is simply an angle that is going to add, or the one angle that is going to have 180 degrees. Whereas a right angle is one angle that is 90. We're going to look at the picture down below, and as we look at this picture, what we want to decide is which angles are supplementary. Now, when you take a look at this, there's actually more than one angle that is supplementary, two angles that are supplementary. You could have angle 1 and angle 5, because together that's 180 degrees. But you also could have had, if we are looking at that same picture, angles 5 and angle 2, because those sum to 180 degrees. So angle 5 and angle 2. If we're talking about complements, complementary angles are ones that total to 90. So if I know that these two angles with this marking is 90 degrees, I have angle 3 and angle 4. Again, if you need to pause this, you need to write down the definitions of these 4 different types of angles and what a transversal is. So you actually might want to pause the video and write down corresponding angles lie on the same side of the transversal in corresponding positions. Now when I look at this, I'm going to put these as orange angles. So the orange ones would be corresponding with angle 1, what it looks like it's in the same spot with the next line, and kind of angle 5. 4 and 8, 2 and 6, 3 and 7. So when you have paused this, written down your definitions, you then want to make a table below that in your notes. And in your table, we're going to put corresponding vertical, alternate interior, and alternate exterior. A little later in this section, what we're going to talk about is, are these angles congruent? And what you're going to find is all of these types of angles are actually going to be congruent that we've been talking about earlier this chapter. Now, we will probably be listing our corresponding ones. When we list our corresponding, we're talking about angle 1 and angle 5. We are also talking about angle 4 and angle 8. We are talking about angle 2 and angle 6. And our last pair that would also be corresponding should be angle 3 and angle 7. And what you're going to notice with the corresponding and the vertical is that there's actually 4 pairs of angles. Vertical is when vertical angles are two angles, again, whose sides form two opposite rays. So if we think of two angles that form opposite rays, we're talking about going across like this. For vertical angles, we're going to mark those in blue on the picture. That would be like angle 2 and 4. So if I'm looking at vertical angles, angle 2 and angle 4. I would also have angle 1 and angle 3. And I'd like you to do in your notes is put down 2 more, angle 5 and angle 6. What are their vertical pairs? If we look at the definition of alternate interior is going to be ones that lie on opposite sides of the line. So if we're talking about alternate interior angles, alternate interior, we're going to label those, if I'm looking at this, with pink. As we look at pink, alternate interior. Alternate interior would be on the inside of this gray area, but on opposite sides of this transversal. So if I was looking at number 3, and number 5. Now, you should see one more pair that are also going to be alternate interior. They have to be on the inside between the two lines. So we would also have angle 4 and angle 6. The last type is alternating exterior. We can see our exterior is blue here. So if we were looking at those being alternating exterior, we're going to use red on our picture. So red is alternating exterior. So if I look at angle 7, the other ones that are exterior are 8, 2, and 1. What's on alternating sides of the line would be 1 and 7. So we're going to have angle 1 and angle 7. We would also have angle 2 and angle 8. Now, when parallel lines are cut by a transversal, what do we know about the types of angles? And it says if you cut this diagram, so we have these two parallel lines. This, by the way, when you put this little arrow, that's the symbol for parallel that we use in mathematics. So if we take this figure as we're looking at this, and we want to actually translate 1, 2, 3, 4, which angles match up? And if we actually see that translation, we can see how our angles correspond. They're in exactly the same spot when we have our parallel lines. So as we look at this, we can see that 2 and 6 are going to correspond. We are going to see that 3 and 7. So what we know is that our corresponding angles are congruent. Now, the same thing kind of happens down below. If we think of reflecting this picture, we know 2 and 4 are called vertical angles, as are 1 and 3. If we have this line of reflection and we reflect this over, what's going to happen is that actually our two angles are going to be exactly the same. 2 and 4 will be congruent in measure. What about when we look at parallel lines and we're talking about our other types of angles? And what we're talking about here is our alternate interior and alternate exterior. Now remember, when we talked about this, we said 2 and 7 are alternating interior. 3 and 6 are alternating interior. As we look at angle 4 and 5, alternating exterior. So the question is, do we think they are congruent? And what I want you to think about is, as I look at this picture, it says, what if we rotate this 180 degrees? The nice thing is I can actually do that rotation. And if I rotate it 180 degrees, remember, it's going to still be right on top of that. And now I'm going to slide it up. And which ones actually, as you're looking at that, are going to correspond if we want to look at that? Well, 4 and 5, 6 and 3. So when we look at this picture, it's really like a rotation that sets those right on top. So we can now see how these two 3s are the same, the 2s, the 1s, and the 4. And so now if I rotate this back 180 degrees, it's tough to get it exactly. And now I'm going to slide it down. You can see I did not do a great job on the exact on that one. We're going to try and straighten that out. And we can see how those are actually going to be congruent. So when you look at your notes on that table, the key thing is that all of these angles are congruent. The corresponding because of the translate, the vertical because of reflection, alternating interior and exterior because when we think about those, we can think about it actually as a rotation. So what you're asked to do now is find the missing angles. If we know this angle happens to be 55 degrees, we know that this angle and 1 happen to be vertical. So they have to be the same measure of 55 degrees. What do we know about angle 1 and 2? They are supplementary, meaning they have to total to 180, which means our angle 2 is 125 degrees. And when you put this in your notes, please draw the picture, label the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when you write your answers, you do want to put this M in front. That tells us the measure of angle 1 is 55, the measure of 2 is 125. Well, what do we know about 2 and 4? They are vertical, meaning they should be the same. But we also know that 4 and this 55-degree angle have to total to 180. And as you see, it's 125. We now want to go to the next picture over. What do we know about 1 and 5? They are corresponding. Corresponding are congruent. 5 and 6 supplementary. 6 has to be 125. 6 is also the same as 4, alternating exterior. 6 and 2 are the same because they correspond. So there's many ways, once you have one angle, of finding the rest of those. 6 and 8, vertical angles. 7 and 8 are going to give us supplementary. Your homework, it says, is to find the measure of angle 1 in this picture. And what you're given is that this angle down here happens to be 105 degrees. So sometimes I think it's helpful for students to write in all the angles that we know are 105. So like I might put 105 here. And on this picture I'm going to go over and I have 105. And I have 5, it's going to be 105 because they correspond. And I now know 2 is 105 because they correspond. And if I know 2 is 105, what do I know about 1? 1 and 2 are supplementary, which means this angle has to be 75 degrees. So angle 1 happens to be 75 degrees. How can we justify our answer? Well, it's kind of a long step. We would have said that these two correspond. The other thing someone could say is that we're actually thinking of rotating this. If we turn and rotate this picture, and we rotate it 180, this angle right here, over to the top here, we are going to see that the 10 matches up with 2. And if 10 and 2 are both 105, these two must be 75. So now you're asked to find the other angles. I'd like you to do that for your homework. So that when I check your notes, we can see those. We're going to do them in class for those of you that are here. And then we'll get started on our worksheets.